Well, hello everybody. Here's what's happening here in our education center. For today's date of Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. As we are continuing to document the ongoing dispute between the government and the education union. So, here we go.
Stephen Lecce is speaking to reporters after that heated debate. Let's listen live.
To be in school.
So you won't negotiate unless they remove their strike mandate.
We're always willing to talk to the unions. We spoke with them yesterday, but we were really hoping that they would withdraw their strike vote. Their strike on Friday that will affect 2 million kids. They have not done that. As you know, they are confirming that they will proceed with the strike, and I think that's really unfair. The reason why we introduced legislation is because the worst case scenario is that they proceed with the strike even after we offered a better deal. And that seems to be their intention today. And they had a choice before them. They, of course, could have said, we will withdraw the strike vote to permit continued negotiating, to try to get to a voluntary settlement. Now, we'll always be ready and willing to work with any union to get a deal, but we will not accept a strike this Friday or any day. And I believe the overwhelming majority of parents insist that their kids are in school. They understand that there's a debate between the parties. They don't think their kids should be the casualty, and I frankly agree.
This legislation you're ramming.
Minister, are you really going to find individual members $4,000 each? Like, I mean, now we've got a situation where the school boards are shutting down the schools,
Right.
so the members can't go into work even if they wanted to. Is there any fairness in the $4,000?
Well, look, we really hope that the penalty elements of the legislation will not have to be used. My hope is that common sense will prevail, that the union will do the reasonable act of withdrawing the threat of a strike that will impact millions of kids after an incredible disruption that has affected their lives. And so I believe and I hope with the 36 hours between now and then, they will withdraw their strike as we've urged them to do so that we can get back to the business of getting a voluntary deal that protects kids and keeps them in the classroom.
This legislation that you're ramming,
Won't finding people $4,000 each like reflect?
I actually want to say this. We need to document the strike action that we saw. If they do walk off the job,
Really poorly on your government? Is that something that the optics that you want out in the public?
I'm cognizant the back to work legislation has always included these types of provisions. What I also know is that what I think parents and the public are quite concerned about is the idea that there would be another strike after 2 years of a pandemic, after strikes that just happened 3 years ago in Ontario. I think that is a deep concern for parents of this province who've seen their kids set back because of a great deal of regression in mental and physical health, social, emotional health, and academics. And so my hope is they will withdraw their strike. We're urging them to withdraw the strike and focus on getting a deal that all parties can live with that keep kids in the classroom. But to date, Randy, right now, the union has reaffirmed their commitment to a strike, and I believe that is entirely unfair to millions of children, and thus the government has no choice but to pursue the legislation. In the absence of moving this legislation through the House on an expedited basis to get there by Thursday, we seek to avoid a strike on Friday. And I believe that is the obligation of a responsible government to say, look, enough. There is a debate. We can have that debate, but kids shouldn't be the casualty of the union's disagreement on pay and benefits.
This legislation, when was it drafted?
The legislation was concluded, I think around the 17-day mark when they initiated their actions or intention to bring us to a strike. They initiated a 17-day no board period. That's when the government had to start thinking about backup options if, of course, the union decided to proceed with their 5-day strike notice. When they did, the government moved quickly, introduced legislation on Monday with the intention of passing it Thursday. All of this was designed in response to the threat the union put themselves with footing. Originally 17 days, Richard, and then it moved to 5, of course, on Sunday when I want to be clear on this, when the union alone on Sunday, before the discussion of legislation, even the contemplation of legislation when it came to communicating that to the union, before that, they made a decision. They invoked the 17 days, then they got to 5 days, and they put the province on a footing to a strike for this Friday. And then that night, we said, come in, let's talk. Because you know that the options governments of different parties have used in the past when these types of threats happen. So let's try to avoid that. Let me offer you more money. Let me maintain your benefit program that is perhaps amongst the best in the nation. Let me maintain the 131 days of sick leave, 11 of which are at 100%, 121 of the short-term disability at 90%. Let's maintain all of those entitlements and increase your pay 2.5 points more than we offered originally. And they alone decided that the prudent step, for whatever reason, is to put the province on a footing to a strike. And therefore, what option does the government have other than to bring forth legislation that ensures these kids, your kids, are in school on Friday? I mean, honestly, I'm open to an alternative option. We urge the union to bring forth a proposal that withdraws the strike. But in the absence of the union withdrawing the threat, not a threat now, the realization of a strike as school boards, as confirmed in Toronto and across the province, are closing, we have to act with legislation.
Minister, has CUPE put a counter offer forward since the 11%? Like since you went back to them with 2.5, have they come back with another offer?
So yesterday, just to demonstrate the point that we've stood ready to negotiate with this union, notwithstanding the legislation that's before them, because we were hoping they would come to, frankly, their senses on a more realistic offer, one that withdraws the threat of strike. Because I just want to be very clear, the reason why we introduced the legislation in the first place is because the union has decided to put the province on a 5-day footing to a strike. Yesterday, we were told by the media we'd get it passed at 10 a.m. Then lunchtime rolled around. I was able to see the leadership on, in media and rallies, etc. At 10 p.m. last night, the government received a pass from the union through the mediator. And of course, we confirmed it, heard it on the media. And what that pass does not include in any way is the commitment to take the strike off the table.
But is it a lower offer than are they offer? Is their counter proposal lower and closer to your 2.5 than?
I can't speak to the proposal only because, as I understand through the private media, the request of both parties is confidence. I'll let the union speak for should they choose to violate that principle. All I'm simply saying is we are at the table with the aim of getting a voluntary deal to avoid a strike. And we urge the union, through the private mediator, Mr. Kaplan, who we've used with this union just 3 years ago. We said, remove the strike threat. Why is there a strike on Friday if we're trying to have, through a private mediator, good faith negotiations to lead to a voluntary settlement that avoids all of this? But that option isn't on the table today. It is regrettable we are here because I don't think we should be here. I want to be very clear. This is the last resort option for any government, the former government and this government. But in the absence of action and leadership, doing what is difficult but frankly necessary to provide stability, we're not going to tolerate Friday and next week when the legislature doesn't sit, potentially multi-day strike on kids. Honestly, I say this often, but I mean it. At what point does a government say enough? And we're simply saying with strong conviction that the kids have paid a price of this pandemic and someone has to stand up for them. And I appreciate this is difficult on the members, on the leadership, on the parents, and on the kids. And I respect our members and I meaningfully urge them to urge their leaders to return to meaningful discussions that remove the threat of a strike. And if we do that, we can get to a deal that averts all of this and keeps kids in the classroom, please.
Are you saying that you're not going to consider what's actually in the counteroffer unless they withdraw the threat of a strike?
The union needs to take the strike off the table. How can we negotiate? I mean, you're not going to look at
well, of course, or sort of consider it on a point-by-point basis.
To be fair, we were at the table yesterday through our negotiating team was present with the private media. We always will be. I want to be very clear. We're always open to listening. We're always open to hearing proposals. What we're asking for, what we're insisting upon on behalf of the people of this province is that they take Friday's threat off the table. That is not a preposterous ask of the union. It's fairly quite common and reasonable. Take the threat off the table and let's talk. We are talking, but let's get to a deal is the next step of the logic. And unfortunately, the union has insisted upon, and I'll get to it, they've insisted upon proceeding with this strike that impacts so many. And I think that's really unfair to kids. Pardon me.
Minister, I'm going to get two here. Minister, can't CUPE just say to you, well, we won't negotiate with you unless you take your, constitutionally breaking legislation off the table? I mean, aren't we at an impasse then? If you're telling them to withdraw their strike, they could tell you, well, you take the legislation off the table. Where do we go from there?
If legislation is taken off the table, the union can proceed with the strike on Friday if a deal isn't met or achieved through the private mediator. And I asked the parents in this room and those that are watching today if they want to take that chance. Like what you're asking is that the government unilaterally withdraw the legislation, which then removes our capacity to mandate kids in school on Friday. And I don't think that is prudent, nor do I think that is fair. I think the first step of this of negotiations and good faith is remove the threat of a strike that's not impacting government. It's impacting the people we all serve, including the members who I know in their heart love their kids, serve their schools, work very hard. We celebrate their work. We want them to show up on Friday and make a difference for our kids. Pardon me, Jeff.
Explain that point. So labor relations works like this, right? Unions can strike. That's their leverage. If they can't strike, why negotiate with them at all? I mean, you're not. You're going to impose it.
We have negotiated,
Will
Jeff.
you not respond to strike ever? Like, will you be 33 to take the strike off the table for secondary school teachers, elementary teachers? Like, where does this end?
We've simply made clear, after 2 extraordinary and difficult years, realizing the data points on learning loss, on mental health, on physical health, and social emotional regression, given the extraordinary circumstance, because this is not normative times. Like, would we all agree on that premise? This is not a normal time for kids. This is 1995 or 98 or 1990 when there were localized strikes on the New Democrats or the Liberals of McGuinty. This is a different time. These kids are in a different place, and they need leadership to stand up to make sure they're in school. And that's what we're doing in this specific case with CUPE under the premise that kids should be in school. Thank you all.
I've heard some of your comments, and I agree. As a parent, I'm deeply frustrated by this minister's intransigence and his complete inability, apparently, to understand how negotiations work. You do not avert a strike by refusing to come to the table. You avert a strike by bargaining a deal with the workers. We are in a position now where the minister is bound and determined to disrupt our kids' education, despite all of his platitudes about difficult times, most epic times in history. He is the one that is disrupting our children's school year by not coming to the table and negotiating a deal. CUPE came to the table yesterday with a counter proposal, and here's the minister standing here this morning with only 2 days left to ensure that our kids are in school, saying he's not going to negotiate unless CUPE removes the strike from the table. And in the long term, if the minister is not actually prepared to sit down with these workers to make the investments in the system, then it is our kids that are going to pay the price. It is the kids who are already paying the price for the minister's refusal to invest in the system. It is our kids with disabilities and special needs who are being shared one EA to 6 kids. It is the parents who are sitting outside of our schools so that they can make sure that their children with disabilities can use the bathrooms. It is our kindergartners in classes of over 30 kids who aren't getting the support.
The reason why we're doing these live streams, because this is something we need to understand. Public education should not be attacked. The only way you can actually revert a strike is to bargain with the union, not
support that they need and deserve from ECEs. It is the principals and the teachers who are having to fill in for custodians who aren't there. We need the minister to come to the table with a deal that is going to ensure that our kids have the caring adults and the fundamental supports that they need and deserve every single day. Happy to take your questions.
When did you guys decide to pull that stunt in that question period?
I'm sorry, stunt? We were standing up for the rights of our kids and our workers, and the government is not listening, and we are doing our best to make sure that the government has to listen.
Are you hearing anything from unions about what could happen after Friday?
No, and I don't want to speculate on what could happen after Friday because we still have 2 days now to avert any kind of disruption to our kids' school year, to the lives of their parents who are just trying to do their best, to the lives of our education workers. Clock's ticking. Let's get this done and protect the school year.
The federal government should intervene.
I think that if this government is going to continue with its intransigence in trying to trample on labor rights and take away fundamental supports from our kids, that all tools should be on the table. But you know, I don't want it to come to that point. I want the government to withdraw this legislation, come to the table, and negotiate a fair deal.
Earlier this year,
do what the NDP did when it was in government and offer unpaid furloughs to unionized workers that wasn't in collective bargaining contracts. I mean, there was extraordinary times in 1992 when Bob Rae was premier. It's apparently extraordinary times now. I'm trying to circle this square. Isn't it easier to say in opposition, the government's being draconian, but when you're in government, you actually have to resort to kind of difficult choices.
I mean, I was a school child during the Bob Rae government, so I can't really answer for their policies. But you know, what will actually address the situation is to make investments in the system to make sure that our workers can actually afford to continue to do these jobs, so that we don't do to the education system what the government has already done to the healthcare system, driving workers out of the system and bringing the system to the brink of collapse.
So can we expect more of this in the days to come, or are you guys going to get kicked out every day of the Ontario legislature? I mean, there's only one day left in the week, but.
We will be doing everything we can to amplify the voices of workers, kids, and parents so that the government cannot ignore them in this important debate. I have a guest with me today that I would like to bring up a moment. It's Karen Littlewood, who is the president of OSSTF.
Okay, we've been listening to Chandra Pasma. She is the NDP education critic, effectively kind of responding to what Education Minister Stephen Lecce just finished saying. The NDP position is that the Progressive Conservatives, with Minister Lecce at the head of the table, should be bargaining a deal, must sit down with the meeting, saying that they want the government to withdraw that back-to-work legislation.
Yeah.
If I would actually want to
perhaps there's a glimmer of hope in the talks between the province and the union representing thousands of education workers, although both sides really continue to dig into the field.
CP24 Chanel Call is outside the Sheraton Center where talks are being held this morning. Chanel, it continues.
We get an agreement in place where.
That's right. And we now know that according to a government source, another offer has been presented to the government by CUPE, one of the 5 education unions here in Ontario. So now the process moving forward is the government will have to review that counter offer sent to them by CUPE. Apparently this happened late last night. Now, we don't have exact details on what was included in that offer, but we can tell you what CUPE has been pushing for during the last 5 months of negotiations. We know, Nick and Jen, that wage increases have been the biggest sticking point during these talks. A yearly wage increase of $3.25 per hour, or 11.7%, is what CUPE says it's looking for. They also want to see ECE workers in every kindergarten class, 5 more paid sick days before the start of the school year, 30 minutes of paid daily prep time, an increase in OT pay, and a $100 million investment in new job creation. Now, while that offer was being prepared yesterday, Nick and Jen, there was a large protest, a large demonstration outside the Ministry of Labour's office on University Avenue in Toronto. This, of course, as the PCs are moving to now impose a contract on those education workers. We saw many people carrying signs calling for people to have their rights defended. After the rally, the group then headed to CUPE, where MPPs were debating that controversial bill.
Actually stay with my dad.
I hope this will help send a message, and I'm seeing lots of messages of support on social media. I'm talking to lots of my friends in the labor movement that are here in Toronto and across this province that are disgusted by what this government is doing. And thankfully for the NDP for standing up for workers' rights, standing up for our bargaining committee. All we want is a fair collective agreement. We don't want to impact kids, we don't want to impact classes, but we need a collective agreement that works for our members.
I would quit. I would actually quit.
And Nick and Jen, you'll remember the province submitted what it called its final offer on Sunday. That was a 4-year deal that included a 2.5% annual wage increase for workers who make under $43,000, and then 1.5% for those who make more. Meantime, over at Queen's Park, debate continues today on that controversial piece of back-to-work legislation that PCs are
honestly, I think Ford really needs to. I feel like it's time for Doug Ford to resign at this point.
Pushing for. We also hear, Nick and Jen, that the
We are
Ford government
calling
is
for
now
Doug.
also trying to put a motion forward today at Queen's Park to get MPPs to stay there and to be debating, hopefully voting on that bill by sometime tonight. So the motion will ask MPPs to stay until midnight tonight. We know that the strike deadline is Friday, and the PCs really want to get this done before then. Back to you.
You know,
All right, thanks so much. Chanel call live this morning outside the Sheraton on
if I
Queen. We'll
were,
continue to follow.
you know, if I were the premier or minister of education, I will never let our education system be put in jeopardy. I would actually consider it. I would actually make it better. I would put maybe a 30%, and I would put a 30% increase on all unions and make them impressed, and then we would work together, and then we would get a deal, and then we would move on. Like, that's how I would do it. But I would negotiate with teachers. Well, here's what I would do. I would lower class sizes to 20 to 1 with a half of 20. With a half of 20. I would actually make our education system, I would recover our education system we're becoming more better, because we need a better education system. Than we actually need someone that actually knows.
A developing story tonight, high above Queen's Park near the Ministry of
We
Labor, where
actually need an
hundreds of people are
education minister
marching
that
and
actually
rallying in
knows what they're
support of
doing.
CUPE education workers who
No,
are
wait,
locked in a
minister,
dispute
stop.
with the Ford government over wage increases.
We're saying this.
Good evening. What started inside the halls of Queen's
We
Park
are
today
not
has
just
spilled out
that.
onto
We are
Toronto's
fighting
streets.
for
The government and the
I
union
have
for the
been saying
thousands
over
of
the
employees
years,
are locked in a bitter
there's some
dispute with
breakthroughs
neither
starting,
side
you're
seemingly
definitely
willing to
seeing
budge.
fewer employees
CTV's
who are
Queen's Park
still
reporter
getting
Siobhan
out
Morris has our top
at
story
500
tonight.
than it
Siobhan.
was when they started.
Nathan, CUPE had talked about the fact that they were preparing a new proposal for wages when it comes to the government,
I'm
something to
saying
present
this
them in the
to be
hopes of averting a
outrageous,
strike
right?
and get
I
around
can't
legislation.
believe
Tonight we're
that
hearing that plan is still in the
honestly,
works.
the Minister of Education.
The debate began before
I'm
the sun
honestly
was up.
siding with him. I totally
Weary
stand with
MPPs
you with
gathered
this.
for a rare 5
with
a.m.
this.
session. The early
Trampling on
jump to
bargaining
pass a
rights
bill that would impose a
will
contract on
this is
CUPE's
literally
educational
Donald Trump
support
fighting
workers on the eve of a planned strike.
This government is violating the rights of 55,000 Ontario workers.
And I totally stand with the MPPs, the NDP. I totally stand with myself, my friends.
And
You're
those
putting
workers
our
are
education
parents
system
too.
at
Newsflash.
risk.
They talk about 54,000 workers. We're talking over 1 million parents that would take work off because you want to feather the nest of the heads of the union. That's unacceptable.
The government is facing blowback for using the notwithstanding clause to get around any court challenge of the bill.
Either you support this
Notice
strike
how many
or you
staff
stand
are
with this
not
government and will
here.
vote for this bill and keep kids in the classroom. Pick a lane.
Opposition parties say deploying the notwithstanding clause out of the gate is wrong.
It's a misuse of that power. And it really diminishes the democracy of all Canadians when we see this overreach.
It's a move that's also raised eyebrows in Ottawa, where Justin Trudeau's father signed the Constitution securing Canadian charter rights 40 years ago.
Using the notwithstanding clause to suspend workers' rights is wrong.
Yeah,
Collective
Trudeau
bargaining
is really not
negotiations
happy
are
with it
sometimes
either.
difficult,
So,
but it has to happen.
The Justice Minister
it
sees
could
the
get to
provincial
the
move as
point where
skipping
the
steps.
government would-
Using it preemptively is exceedingly problematic.
Honestly,
It
I would
cuts
consider it that.
off
I would
both
invoke
political
that
debate
would stop it dead in
and
its
judicial
tracks.
scrutiny.
Lametti
And-
says he'll look at possible intervention, but
federal disallowance of a provincial law is provided for in the Constitution, but politically that's hard to imagine.
leaving the federal government with few options.
We have asked the provincial government about their response to that criticism from the federal government, and at this point, we're still waiting for a formal response. There are still 2 more days of mediation between the province and CUPE. CUPE still believes there's a path to a deal at the negotiating table. Reporting live from Queen's
There's
Park,
simply
I'm
no
Siobhan
way of
Morris.
getting a
Nathan,
deal
back
at
to
this
you.
All right, thank you, Siobhan.
While public workers get together to support
I have been doing
CUPE, thousands of
updates
families across the city and
over
throughout the
6
province
weeks
tonight
now,
are
and I wanna
scrambling
say
to find
this is
childcare for
the-
Friday.
Several school
I
boards
have
have said
not-
they will have no choice but to close for in-person learning in the event of a strike. CTV's Janice Golding has been taking
So
the temperature
far,
of parents
apparently they're
and
saying
joins
there
us
will be
now with
no
that angle.
virtual learning
Janice.
whatsoever.
Hi, Michelle. Yes, we've
In
been
the
speaking
event
to
of a strike, there will be no one to, there will be no one. There will be no one to work virtually with us. There will be no way to help us. So I want to see this. There will be no one to help us. There will be no one to get home.
a lot of parents today, and childcare certainly is top of mind. And while some say they have family members that they can turn to,
And keep in mind,
many
I've
more
actually
say
been
they will
doing
have
this
to take the day
every
off work
day.
on Friday if there is a walkout. And they're also concerned about just how long this is going to go on.
Wait, heard it from Katie?
Kids are in class for now, but many school boards across the GTA are asking parents to come up with alternate arrangements for childcare in the event support staff stage a province-wide protest
I don't
Friday.
know.
I'm not happy with this.
Never know.
I'm probably
like,
gonna have to stay home with my kids. It's just gonna be a long weekend.
As parents scramble to come up with childcare, others say that's a secondary issue. For them, the primary concern is their children's education.
Because we have just came from the COVID and it's very, very difficult if we're gonna having like again this strike.
As a parent, I feel a little frustrated that my kids cannot go to the school, and I hope that this get resolved.
It's not good thinking that how much days they
Walker
lost
education
for
connection.
COVID and for the PA days that they usually have 1 day in
Oh,
a
look
month.
at Walker.
The QP moves forward with its day of protest Friday, meaning 55,000 support staff walk off the job. The Toronto District School Board, the Toronto Catholic District School Board, Durham District School Board, Durham Catholic District School Board, and the York Catholic District School Board all say classes will be cancelled and schools will be closed. Those still monitoring the situation include York Region District School Board, Peel District School Board, and the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board.
I'm a little disappointed, but I think that the QP workers are doing the right thing. It's disappointing, but I agree with everyone that is striking.
I do have an issue with it. I do think that they should go to work and all, but again, I do understand their standpoint as well.
So you sympathize, though, with the work?
100%.
And at this time, it remains to be seen if the protest extends to next week, with the president of CUPE's Ontario School Board Council of Unions saying what workers do will depend on what happens. Now, any job action could be very costly to the union, which could be fined upwards of $220 million each day the workers are off the job. Reporting live, I'm Janice Golding. Now back to Nathan.
All right, thank you, Janice. And another look at the rally from the ground, just down the road from Queen's Park. The Ontario Federation of Labour has organized a gathering saying the actions of the Ford government to impose back-to-work legislation and a new contract for CUPE staff
I would be right on the
CUPE
front
says
line.
its 55,000 members will stage a province-wide strike Friday, despite the new legislation.
Honestly, here's what I would do.
We have extensive coverage of this dispute online, including a list
Oh,
of the
you
school
would be
boards
right. I
expected
would
to
be right on
close
the front
Friday.
line of Queen's Park
Everything
on Friday.
parents need to know on our
I'll
website
be
at
right on the front line of
ctvnewstoronto.ca.
Queen's Park.
A big day if you are a parent with kids.
Not only would it be the unions, we will be standing there as well. I'm saying this. You're right.
Not going to put up with it.
You're not gonna allow it. We are not gonna allow it.
All we're getting from this government is hot air and bullying. People have to stand up, resist, tell them we're not going to put up with it.
Dramatic developments in an ongoing education labor dispute. Provincial leaders kicked out of the Queen's Park legislature over the ongoing debate.
Meantime, the countdown continues for parents. Can a deal be reached before workers walk off the job on Friday? Good afternoon. Negotiations are ongoing at the Sheridan Centre downtown today.
The province and the union representing 55,000 education workers trying to hammer out a deal. The pressure coming from the parents, the public, Queen's Park, and beyond. CTV's Siobhan Morris has the latest.
The official opposition making a lot of noise in question period. One by one, kicked out of the legislature. as they shouted at the government benches for forcing a contract on CUPE education workers.
You will be named. Mr. Tabbins, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
Most of the NDP caucus were moved to take a stand.
We have rights, we have constitutional rights, and this government is throwing them out because they're too weak to get back to the negotiating table and get a deal with this union.
A few kilometers away, inside the Sheridan Centre, CUPE says its negotiators are waiting on a response to a new proposal. How far it moves from the union's ask for an almost 12% annual pay bump, we don't know. Downtown last night, a show of solidarity with CUPE from other unions, angry about the imposition of a contract and the use of the notwithstanding clause.
If the intent was just to stop us from striking, there was loads of ways you could have done that. But instead, what they did was go to what is now being called that nuclear option, the notwithstanding clause that interferes with people's charters' rights, that interferes with people's human rights.
We're at the table with a fair and reasonable offer. Matter of fact, a very fair, the best in the country. And yet the union refuses to withdraw the strike notice.
CUPE has said their members will be off the job Friday in protest. Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
CTV's Janice Golding is next. Parents preparing for Friday and making plans in case the kids don't go to class. Janice, what more can you tell us?
Hi, Michelle. Well, as the end of the week approaches and with it promised strike action, we spoke to parents today about what a strike will mean to them and what they are preparing to do. As Simon Manello dropped his kids off at West Hill Public School this morning, he reflected on what a school strike will mean for he and his family.
Stay at the house and watch my kids, and that's it. No work.
And for Manello, as well as many other parents, no work means no paycheck.
Our company will not pay on us, and it's hard for like me and like low-income family.
It will be difficult. It will be growing company probably for the work, but honestly, we're in this for the long haul.
The union representing 55,000 school support staff has threatened a strike day on Friday, even as the province threatens back to work legislation.
So I'm absolutely happy about Friday. We need to take a stand.
Sana, an early childhood educator and parent herself, says there's a reason support workers like herself gave the union a 96.5% strike mandate last month in the event a deal could not be reached.
It's hard as a parent, but it needs to be done because we really need to step up. We're really struggling here with salary, the support, all of that. It's well needed.
As the union and the province return to mediated talks with last-minute discussions resuming yesterday, parents say they just hope the two sides can reach a deal.
We'll make them study at home, but we hope that somehow this strike is averted. Hopefully things get sorted out.
So it's a situation of watching and waiting while parents do what they can to make alternate childcare arrangements. Now, CTV has reached out to parent groups as well as organizations such as the ROM, the Zoo, and the Ontario Science Centre to see if they have anything special planned for Friday, but we have not heard back with any concrete plans. We will have more details as they become available. Reporting live from Janice Golding. Now back to Michelle.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Janice. And we have extensive coverage of this dispute online, including a list of all the school boards that are expected to close on Friday. Everything parents need to know on our website at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
It's another beautiful.
All right, guys. Now let's go on to the legislators. We have been doing a lot of nonstop coverage. Nonstop. We did nonstop coverage. Nonstop. I don't really want to worry about semi right now. The education system is more important than semi.
It is now time for oral questions. I recognize the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, to the Premier, over the last few days, many Ontarians have written to New Democrat MPPs to share stories of the role that education workers play supporting kids in our schools. The common thread in all of them is that despite the best efforts of this government to starve our education system of resources, the quality of kids' education is being protected because of the hard work of education workers and their teachers. At the end of the day, it's our kids who are going to pay the price if this Premier and his minister don't get back to the bargaining table. Will the government commit to scrapping Bill 28 and bargaining in good faith today?
Members, please take your seat. And to reply, the Premier.
Speaker, that's exactly why we want to keep them in class. We'll do whatever it takes to keep students in class where they belong. We want parents to know that we're doing everything we can to make sure their child doesn't miss a single day of class. We're at the table with a fair and reasonable offer. Matter of fact, a very fair, the best in the country. And yet the union refuses to withdraw the strike notice. Mr. Speaker, we don't want to be here. No one wants to be here and have to do this. We've heard from countless parents, endless parents. Matter of fact, there's never been an issue in 4.5 years that I've had more emails about saying, make sure my kids stay in the class every single day.
Afternoon. This message is for all grade 12 students and families. Stay
And we know how difficult the pandemic has been on our children, but we need QP to withdraw the strike threat. And I'm not going to tolerate, Mr. Speaker, students being out of the classroom for even one day. The NDP and the Liberals either...
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The supplementary question, the member for Toronto Centre.
Thank you for the applause, and thank you, Speaker. To the Premier, my question is for you. Jenny, a local parent, told my office, and I'm going to share her story. I am one of those parents whose child relies absolutely on those incredible education workers. They have to be toileted. My child needs to be supervised during meals to prevent choking, to walk safely down the stairs and up the stairs. Medication has to be administered, and yes, the child still has to learn. Speaker, this government gave 88% of their PC MPPs a $16,000, $600 raise this June. Speaker, will the Premier, my question to the Premier, will this government be willing to actually give education workers a raise that they deserve and match it to inflation?
To reply, the Premier.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. We will always support our frontline workers, plain and simple. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, the fact is QP continues to threaten to shut down the classrooms. They refuse to back down from a strike. Our offer maintains the most generous, I'm going to repeat that, the most generous pension and benefit plan in the entire country, including 131 paid sick days, unheard of anywhere. We're seeing school boards confirm what will close. The doors will be closed if QP goes on strike. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, we won't let that happen. Nothing matters more right now than ensuring the students remain in the classroom. We're investing over $26.6 billion in public education, the single largest investment in Ontario history, Mr. Speaker. Education funding for this year.
Thank you. Thank you. The official opposition will come to order. The supplementary question, member for Toronto Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. Talking points are cheap, Premier, and when it comes to education workers, they can't eat. That's why they're at the food banks. That's why they're holding down second jobs. I'm going to share another story with you, Premier, and through the Speaker. Carrie, another teacher, tells my office, one of our ECAEs held a little girl in her lap until her grandpa had to come because she was throwing up in a garbage can. The ECE refused to leave this little girl because she was scared and nervous. Carrie then tells me, I watched our other ECE march down to the kinders to the library because they had to evacuate the classroom while their education assistant was controlling a friend who was having a moment or episode. All these little ones had adorable, beautiful smiles on their faces as they passed the teacher's window and gave her a wave. They didn't even know that anything was wrong in their classroom, despite the fact that there was. A caretaker then marched down the hallway with a bucket in hand to then clean up the mess on the floor because 4 students got sick that same day. All of that happened within a 24-hour period, all within an hour. Speaker, will this government show the fraction of emotional intelligence that we see from education workers that they exercise every single day and return to the bargaining table and give them a fair deal?
That's right. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, how about the students? How about the mental, emotional, and even physical well-being of 2 million students, and therefore the
Member for Davenport will come to order. The member for Toronto St. Paul's will come to order. The member for Ottawa Centre will come to order. The Premier has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, parents and kids have had enough. We've heard it. I've never seen anything like it. There's only one party in this legislature that is standing up for the students and the parents, and that's the PC party. Mr. Speaker, the opposition can't have it both ways. Either they support shutting down schools or they stand with this government and will support keeping kids in classroom. It's either strikes or students.
Respond.
And we're with the students.
Thank you. The next question. Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, again to the Premier. The government's use of the notwithstanding clause to ban workers from collective bargaining is wrong. It's something the Prime Minister and I seem to agree on, and I don't agree with him on almost anything. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say. You're a good buddy. You're a good buddy. The suspension of people's rights is something you should only do in the most exceptional circumstances. And I really hope that all politicians call out the overuse of the notwithstanding clause to suspend people's rights and freedoms. The Premier is fond of standing shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister. I've seen the photos. So, will the Premier change tack today, join the Prime Minister, his good friend, and condemn the use of the notwithstanding clause?
To reply, the Minister of Education.
Let me remind the member opposite that children in this province should have rights too, and they should be in school in this province. Mr. Speaker, we have been clear.
I can't hear the Minister. Minister of Education has the floor. Order.
Speaker, we have been clear. We believe children should be in school. They have been through 2 incredibly difficult years. They have been through the most difficulty in modern history. We have an obligation to ensure stability. We asked the union to bring forth a proposal that withdraws a strike on Friday. We gave them multiple opportunities to do so. And yesterday night at 10 p.m., hearing from the mediator and through the media,
for Davenport, come to order.
Proceed with a strike that no one wants and no one should accept. Mr. Speaker,
Member for Sudbury, come to order.
The Premier made it clear we shouldn't be here.
Response.
We obviously would prefer a negotiated settlement, but so long as a strike is on the table, the government will move forward with legislation that protects stability.
Stop the clock, please. So, yeah, once again, if you repeatedly ignore the request of the Speaker to come to order, I will move to warnings. And then we know what happens after that if you ignore that. Okay. Start the clock. Supplementary.
Speaker, this government is damaging the education system that our children depend on. They are bullying the educators and the workers that we depend on to educate these children. They are engaged in a flagrant attack on working people, and unions are taking notice, even the ones that have been friendly with this government. LiUNA was first out of the gate in endorsing Ford last election, but had harsh words for this government. International Vice President Joe Mancinelli On behalf of LiUNA, we call on Minister Lecce to revoke anti-union legislation and restore the collective bargaining rights of CUPE members and act in good faith to reach an agreement that prioritizes both keeping students in school and rights of and respect for all workers. So, to the Premier, will he listen to his friends at LiUNA and rip up Bill 28?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we want CUPE to respect the interests of children and parents who want to see their kids in school. They should not be out of class on
member
Friday.
for Davenport is
the
warned.
union was given an opportunity to rescind this needless strike. They alone have put themselves on a footing for a strike on Sunday when they announced 5-day notice to strike, impacting 2 million children. We believe that is unacceptable and incompatible with the priorities of parents who believe stability is critical at a time of learning disruption and the pandemic. We have an obligation to ensure they stay in class. And Mr. Speaker, so long as the union regrettably proceeds with this unacceptable strike, the government will have no choice but to proceed with legislation to avert a strike and keep these kids in the classroom where they belong.
Toronto St. Paul's, come to order. Final supplementary.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, when will the Premier and his ministers stop lying about the damage they're doing to the education system?
Order. Order. The member will withdraw his unparliamentary comment.
I will not withdraw. I'm telling the truth. They're lying.
Take his seat. Member will take his seat.
Speaker. Speaker.
Order. I will ask the member once again to withdraw his unparliamentary comment.
My remarks were accurate and true. The Premier and his ministers are lying.
You will be named. Mr. Tabbins, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
You are named.
Dylan, hand out.
Okay.
Order. Member for Sudbury is warned. The member for Sudbury, if you don't stop yelling, the member for Sudbury, you will be named. Mr. West, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
Every one of you should be
The member for Davenport will come to order. Member for Davenport, you will be named if you don't stop. You will persist. Ms. Stiles, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. The member for Toronto St. Paul's will come to order. The member for Toronto St. Paul's is warned. If you continue, you will be named. Ms. Andrew, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
I believe I have to do this.
Okay. The next question, the member for Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the government is actively stripping away collective bargaining rights from workers. We've been listening to education workers in my community of Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, and Niagara-on-the-Lake. In Niagara, we spoke to Carrie, a school secretary who's been a loyal worker for nearly 20 years. She still makes under $39,000 a year, has a second job just to make ends meet. She even considered getting a third job because of the increased cost of food, gas, and housing. Speaker, does this premier think that education workers should have to work 2 extra jobs in order to avoid using food banks?
And to reply, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we have been clear. We do believe children should be in the classroom. They have to be in school every day after 2 years of disruption and strikes that preceded it just a few years ago, Mr. Speaker. We brought forth a reasonable, fair offer to the union, 10% over 4 years, maintaining benefits and pensions and sick leave, which most people in this economy do not have. Mr. Speaker, even with that said, we told the union, rescind this strike on Friday that impacts every single student
Waterloo
in the
come
province. They announced this strike on Sunday, even before the government introduced the legislation on
Member
Monday.
for Waterloo
It was their
is warned.
intention all along, and it is regretful. We should not be here. We should have had a voluntary agreement given the fair offer we proposed, but they have made clear they
Member
will
for St.
strike.
Catharines, come
The
to order.
government obviously has no other option but to move forward with legislation that protects the in-person learning our children deserve in this province, Speaker.
The supplementary question.
Back to the premier, but before I ask my next question, maybe out of respect for our veterans, maybe the Minister of Education should put a poppy on. Everybody else in the House has one on. Well, the charter rights are ignored by this government, and they hold back $2.1 billion in spending. We continue to hear from education workers that are struggling. Our office spoke this week to Jennifer, an educational assistant with over 20 years on the job. She's never seen it so bad. Schools do not have EA supply staff they need. Staff are facing rising violence in our schools. They can't hold on to staff due to low wages, serious health and safety concerns. Speaker, does a premier think that trampling on the Charter of Rights and refusing to invest in our education system is going to fix the crisis we have in our school? And premier, answer the question.
To reply, the Minister of Education.
Speaker, we believe kids should be in the classroom. We brought forth a reasonable proposal for children. And yet again, the members opposite have not spoken about the impacts on kids that this strike, driven by the union, announced by themselves alone on Sunday, will have on their
For Ottawa Centre.
and the
Come to order.
millions of kids in this
Waterloo.
Mr.
is-
Speaker, that is really sad that they have not raised any concern
Niagara Falls, come
about
to
the
order.
impacts to children's learning.
The member for Windsor West, come to order. Member for Parkdale High Park, come to order. The member for Waterloo will be named if she persists. Ms. Fife, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. The member for Niagara Falls, if you persist, you'll be named. Mr. Gates, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. Ms. Carpocci, come to order. If you persist, you will be named. Member for Parkdale. Ms. Carpocci, you are named, and you must leave the chamber for the day. The member for Windsor West is warned, and if you persist, you will be named. Ms. Gretzky, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. The member for Thunder Bay Superior North must come to order. Member for Ottawa Centre, come to order. If you persist, you will be named. Mr. Harden, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. Ms. Bourgois, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
You are me.
Article 1 of the Charter of Rights of Man reads, the freedom of association that this government has contempt for. Utter contempt. Not working with that. I respect all the education officers in the day.
Ms. Gretzky's been named.
Would this be acceptable, Premier, for your daughters? Somebody was doing this to them. Would it be acceptable?
Where are we on the list? Where are we on the list? He's still got the floor. The next question, the member for Stormont Dundas, South Kensington.
Thank you, Speaker. The Government of Ontario has a responsibility to parents and students. This is a sacred trust. That responsibility includes the guarantee of top quality education for our children and placing the most qualified teachers in front of our students. We've heard many times about the need for students to remain in class and what students will learn in these classes. However, the individuals teaching these classes matter just as much as the subject's content. From principals and vice principals to math, art, music, and science teachers, and many more types of educators we have in this province, we need the most qualified individuals at the front of the classroom. Speaker, to the Minister of Education, what has our government done to ensure the right educator is in front of our children?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for this question and his interest as a parent and as a leader in this House, standing up for quality education in the classroom. Mr. Speaker, it was over a decade ago that the former Liberal government consented in a union negotiation to a regulation, a regressive regulation called Reg 274, a regulation that permitted exclusive hiring and promotion in Ontario based on seniority.
Okay. You must leave the chamber.
And also food that's maybe a little bit.
Minister of Education. Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, a regressive regulation introduced by the former Liberals that hired and promoted educators exclusively based on their union seniority. If this was...
Okay. You must leave the chamber.
I will gladly leave, and I'm a teacher for 30 years. You are destroying public education. You're worse than parents.
Yeah, you know what? I want to say I will be in that chamber. We are planning.
Speaker, it has been 2 years since the government revoked disastrous Regulation 274 that hindered young, innovative, and hardworking teachers from moving up in the system. This is a positive reminder of the importance of diversity in our education system. In the last year, young educators across my riding and veteran educators have expressed their delight in this government's revoking Regulation 274. They are grateful that our government recognized and provided a solution to previous hiring practices that neither rewarded hard work nor gave the best chance of having the best possible educator in front of our children. As our province population grows, our government must focus on the future to ensure that we have enough educators in places experiencing that growth. Speaker, can the Minister of Education please explain how revoking Regulation 274 encourages teacher mobility?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite for the question. I want to just be very clear on our intent. This is essentially the anniversary of the revoking this regressive regulation introduced by the former Liberals that allowed hiring based on union seniority. I believe that is inconsistent with the premise that the best educator should be in the front of a child's class. and the members opposite who stand up and speak about so-called the interests of kids oppose that measure. They opposed us removing that regulation. We believe new educators, young educators, and those with the qualifications should triumph in hiring, not someone who's simply been in the union the longest. This is about quality.
Literally,
This is about
guys,
ensuring the
where were we all
best staff
standing
member
for the
could
education
inspire
system?
a child. And that's why we removed this regulation, which even the former Liberal Premier agreed went too far. The Ontario Principals Council said they supported it. Parents support it, and the government will continue to do everything possible to enshrine quality in the schools of this province. Speaker.
Next question, the member for Toronto, Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. My office has been flooded with calls and emails from workers and parents alike, outraged that this government seeks to use the notwithstanding clause to violate the labour rights of education workers. I heard from Linda in Welland. She's been an administrative clerk for 10 years, and in that time has seen only a $2 wage increase. When you factor in inflation over that time, she suffered a 10.7% wage cut. Linda says, quote, "The minister has no concept of the work we do. Come and see what we do in our schools. Spend one day with me." Can the minister tell Linda why this government continues to forge ahead with legislation that disrespects her work, tramples on her rights, and pushes her further into poverty?
Minister of Education.
I want to
Yes,
echo the member
right,
opposite's
right.
sentiment of gratitude to the members who work in our schools. It's why, Speaker, we've hired 7,000 since we came to office. It's why in this proposal, we're going to hire 1,800 more. We're going to increase their wages every single year, 2.5%, every single year, 10 points over 4 years. We're going to maintain their pension and their benefits and their sick leave program of 131 days. That is a demonstration of commitment to their workers. And we believe children in this school, in this province, should be in school. That should not be a position which we disagree with. And the Premier asked a simple question: will you vote for a bill that ensures stability for the kids we all represent in this province?
Supplementary question.
Speaker, that answer is not satisfactory for the 55,000 education workers whose rights he is abusing. Ella Marie from Welland said to my office, the minister should come work a week in each of our positions to see if it's worth the pay we get. The abuse that EAs endure. Many of the EAs can't make meetings because they're at a second job. If you're a single person trying to find an apartment in Welland, you're looking at anywhere from $1,600 to $2,100 a month, plus utilities. I don't even bring in $2,400 a month. When you're a single income person, how do you expect someone to live off that? Speaker, can the minister tell Ella Marie and her colleagues, most of them women, how they are supposed to live on wages that don't cover the bills and an insulting pay increase that plunges them further into poverty? And why is this premier acting like a dictator and a thug?
I'm going to ask the member to withdraw his unparliamentary comment.
Speaker, I stand up for free collective bargaining and I won't withdraw.
One more chance. Mr. Birch, you are named. You will leave the chamber for the day. Order. Member for London North Centre will come to order. Member for London North Centre is warned. If he persists, he will be named. Mr. Kernahan, you are named. You will leave the chamber for the duration of the day.
Shame on all of you. Human rights.
Mr. Kernahan, you are named. You will leave the chamber for the duration of the day.
Shame on all of you.
Or do we let? The next question, the member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. in their final economic.
I think we'll skip a few minutes because we'll skip a few minutes. But we're gonna need to.
Growth in Essex. The next question, the member for Algoma, Manitoulin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question, c'est
My question is for the Premier. Someone in retirement came to my office yesterday. She works as in a school for 60 years, and she's thinking to go back to work because she was not sure that they were able to keep their house with the salary of her husband, who worked at a school, taking care of everything. He worked there for a lot of time until he could not continue. And they thought they could retire after 35 years of work. What does the minister think? That they don't not deserve a quality of life that is respectful?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman who served a career of service for our children. And I know that for many of these workers, they want to be with their kids. It's why I'm urging the leadership of the union to withdraw this strike that will impact that member, the children in his riding, and all of our ridings. 2 million kids will be out of class Friday because the union has decided alone to proceed with the strike that no one wants or should accept. These kids should be in school. They've been through incredible difficulty of pandemic disruptions and strikes that preceded it. And at what point does the government say enough? These kids deserve to be in school. They have rights too, and we will stand up to ensure stability for every single child in this province.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's a story of a constituent who has 2 young children and is a teacher's aide. And she has to have 2 works to survive. And these are all the bills: $230 for their groceries, to pay it has to pay for the car as well as insurance. They have $2,008 salary, but they have a deficit of $1,000. So they cannot survive. Stephanie is forced to work elsewhere. So my question is simple. Mr. Premier, when will you stop lying to the population? Go negotiate with the union what it's supposed to do with the rights of workers. With all respect I do to you, I will not withdraw my comment. All the workers in this province. I would not withdraw my comment.
You must leave the chamber for the day. The member for St. Catharines is warned. If you persist, you will be named. Ms. Stevens, you are named and you must leave the chamber for the day.
The opposition says a small piece of the bill will eliminate city requirements to build rental replacement units and will be specifically.
A lot of TNTV is just getting removed for the day. This is what we're watching.
Seniors who are on fixed incomes. Johnson has lived in an annex apartment building for 17 years. The landlord's plan is to replace it with a 29-story condo tower. Right now, the city bylaw requires redevelopments to offer current tenants replacement units at similar rents. Currently, that is
The next question, the member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ontario has wielded the notwithstanding clause only 3 times in history, but all by this government. In 2018, the Conservative government changed Toronto City Council districts right in the middle of an election. In 2021, this Conservative government overrode a judge who said that their own witness admitted there was no reason for extending the restriction period for third-party political ads. And now, this Conservative government is cutting inflation-adjusted real wages for education sector workers struggling with the cost of living. This is a sorry pattern. It's an abuse. Section 33 of our charter, the notwithstanding clause, is being wielded as a sledgehammer to take care of their problems. To the Premier, through you, Mr. Speaker, is Bill 28 just the start? Are you planning to trample rights to dispose of other tough issues?
Minister of Education.
We've been abundantly clear we would have preferred a voluntary option. It was our government that got a voluntary agreement with every education union just 2.5 years ago. Mr. Speaker, when the union on Sunday announces unilaterally that they will strike on Friday, what are the options before government other than introducing legislation to avert a strike and deliver stability for children? If the Liberals and New Democrats' position is to hope for the best with a deal, if the union does not withdraw a strike, then we're putting kids in a perilous position. And clearly this union is going to strike. It was their intention all along. We have an obligation to stand up for children, to keep them in school, and to provide some stability for their families, for their working parents, and for the kids of this province, Speaker.
Supplementary question.
Mr. Speaker, rights help protect us, especially the least among us, from tyranny and injustice. Using the notwithstanding clause in our Constitution means canceling Section 2, fundamental freedoms, canceling Section 7, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and canceling Section 15, equality rights. Just so
Literally the whole
Conservative
opposite.
government can head off court challenges and impose its inflation-adjusted real wage cut on education workers. Many of these education workers are the ones most struggling with cost of living given today's inflation. Will the Premier accept that it's wrong to smash our charter rights instead of using arbitration to settle a wage dispute with the people who keep our schools open? And will he withdraw Bill 28?
Minister of Education.
Speaker, we're calling on the members' office to stand with this government in urging CUPE to withdraw this needless strike impacting 2 million children. We have an obligation to speak up for them. This union decided on Sunday, before the government even introduced legislation on Monday, that they're going to strike. The reason why we're here having this debate as we speak is because they alone decided to proceed with a strike impacting 2 million kids. Even on the day, Speaker, we increased our offer to 10% over 4 years, maintaining benefits and pensions and sick leave for these members. We're hiring 1,800 more. We've hired nearly 7,000 to date. We are committed to investing more in public education, $680 million more this year compared to last year. What we also are committed to, Speaker, is standing up and keeping kids in the classroom.
Next question, the member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and to you and through you to the Minister of Labour. The skilled trades are vital for the communities in my riding of Sarnia-Lambton and across Ontario.
All right, we'll skip a few. Boy, I have been listening to a lot of questions about Republican.
Scarborough Southwest constituents and constituents across Scarborough, actually.
Southwest.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. I have been hearing from Scarborough Southwest constituents and constituents across Scarborough, actually, who have nonstop for the past 2 days called and emailed us with stories. And I can assure this Premier and this government that it was not just education workers or union bosses, as they would like to claim, or point fingers at to blame. In fact, it's parents like Christina who is livid with this government's blatant disregard to protect workers and ensure that her child has the quality support that she needs, that the child needs
I
in the
actually
classroom.
told-
It's parents like Rachel, who is a parent, a volunteer, and
I
an
also want to
educational
say I'm ready to
assistant.
take a
It's
stand
parents
for
like Judy, Speaker, who is a grandma to a kindergarten student who volunteers at a food bank, and she herself has seen education workers who come to those food banks because they do not make
Question.
enough, Speaker. So my question is simple. Why is this government and why is this minister ignoring these voices of these parents and so many others across this province?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we are listening to the priorities and voices of parents who demand their children are in school. That is why we are here today, reacting to a union's decision to strike on Friday, a strike which I would hope none of us would support. And the fact is, Speaker, they are proceeding with a strike on Friday against the interests of 2 million children, even after the government urged them to withdraw the strike, to bring forth a reasonable offer, and to negotiate a deal that we can all live with. But here we are, Speaker, 2 days before a strike that will impact so many of the kids of this province, many of whom are vulnerable and should be in our schools. And so, Speaker,
For
we are
Scarborough
bringing
Southwest
forth
will come to order.
legislation before this House that will provide stability for parents, realizing, Speaker,
Response.
that the preference of government is a voluntary option. When unions continue to discuss a path to a strike, we will move forward on a path to provide stability for kids, Speaker.
The supplementary question.
Speaker, this government had the worst record in the country and across the world when it came to dealing with COVID in our school system, in our education. 27 weeks, our schools were closed. They did not have proper instructions for
Hey, you know I will not.
and that's what happened under this ministry and this government, Speaker. And they have the audacity to talk about bringing back students to classrooms. Do we have anybody on strike right now? No, we don't. You are preemptively introducing a legislation that tramples on the rights of workers across this province. And this legislation, make no mistake, everyone knows this, including unions that have supported you. They know this because they're on the side of workers today. You know why? Because this kind of legislation, they make precedent for future, for all workers, Speaker. And I stand in solidarity with the teacher who stood there, who taught for 30 years. I stand with all these parents. I stand with the students who suffered and right now are suffering through so many mental health issues. They need educational workers, Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. To reply, Minister of Education.
And Mr. Speaker, the member opts to stand up and vote for this bill and keep children in the classroom. But we know the NDP and the Liberals regrettably will not.
Member for University
Speaker,
Rosedale.
I want to share a story, Speaker, from Kelly.
The
who
member
said,
for University
I quote,
Rosedale
I'm writing to you
is
today
warned.
to ask you to continue to protect rights.
If you persist, you'll be named. Ms. Bell, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day. The member for Spadina Fort York will come to order. The member for Spadina Fort York is warned. If you persist, you will be named. Mr. Glover, you are named. You must leave the chamber for the day.
Rarely ever.
NDP MPPs ejected from the legislature in this debate over the government's use of the notwithstanding clause.
These are the things that you are going to be voting for to suspend. So I ask you, all of the conservative MPPs, stand up for the charter rights of the people in this province. Do not vote for Bill 28 today.
The next question. Member for Simcoe Grey.
Good morning. Speaker, reports about new home buyers being victimized by unethical developers.
Right, that's not conservative. So we'll to what I had.
16 or so minutes here on
Next question.
I'll probably hear off. We have been listening to the public question period. Today they have stood up for education.
Member for Nickel Belt.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Premier.
OSSTF and OPSU, including medical, lab technologists, teachers, social workers, educational assistant, early childhood educator, and many other essential workers. They are calling for immediate action to respect all of those public workers. Premier, will you listen?
This is actually very disrespectful to everyone here. Not just me. Yeah. Hey, Mom.
Hi, baby.
Okay, what?
To those professional, other unionized public sector workers, withdraw Bill 28 and go back to the bargaining table with CUPE.
Well, you know what happened today, Mom?
Thank you, Member Officer, for the question. I will agree.
16 MPPs from the New Democrat Party all got ejected.
For our society and for our public services. I appreciate.
I love you, Mom.
We have hired 7,000 more education staff, specifically CUPE educators in our schools today. We're going to commit to hiring 1,800 more education workers and 800 more teachers in our schools, part of the proposal before the House. Now, Mr. Speaker, let us be clear. We didn't want to be here. We would have preferred a voluntary option. We gave the union a path to avert a strike that they themselves put the province on in response to their action of striking on Friday with millions of kids in the crosshairs. We brought forth the bill as a last resort to ensure children remain in school. And I would hope that those members, their leadership, the people of Ontario will understand we are committed to their work, but we're also committed to keeping kids in school.
Member for Nickel Belt, supplementary.
Speaker, this government has established a pattern of disrespecting and devaluating public sector workers. We are seeing it in healthcare, we are seeing it in education, and they seem to have a particular disdain for sector dominated by women workers. Speaker, we have seen it with the devastating impact of this government low-wage policy with Bill 124. Education workers, healthcare workers, they're exhausted, they're demoralized, and they're leaving their job. Yet the government continues to deny that people want this government to respect the Charter of Right and Freedom. They want them to go back with CUPE, get an agreement that nobody likes, you won't like it, CUPE won't like it, but everybody can live with. Will you withdraw Bill 28, go back to the negotiations table?
A lot of people that were off at
Mr. Speaker, we
are
never
walking
left the
themselves
negotiating
back
table.
into a
We
strike.
always remain willing to meet the union so long as they withdraw their strike on Friday. I mean, honestly, do you agree that there should be a strike in the backdrop of a negotiation when we're trying to provide stability for kids? Our simple ask is withdraw the strike, allow kids to be in school, ensure children have the stability they deserve. And that's a reasonable request, especially knowing, Speaker, we are increasing their pay every year over the course of the program. We're hiring 1,800 more. We're preserving benefits and pensions and 131 days of sick leave, which most people in this economy could only dream
We're
of.
actually
This is a
live
competitive
streaming,
offer.
and
What
we're
we're
doing
asking
it. We're
for is for
watching this
students
right
to
on our
come
live
first in this
stream.
debate. Let's make sure they stay in school on Friday and every day this school year.
The next question. The next question, the member for Scarborough Centre.
Speaker.
Fortunately, he could not, but to those of you who tried and who are trying to, thank you very much. It comes from here, and we are standing in solidarity. A 10-year-old boy was asked to change his T-shirt because he was doing it in solidarity with workers.
I want to actually say what a day it has been at Queen's Park. We also saw another update. Here we go. And they say, well, no. They have said that they will now strike until further notice. So I'm saying we are ready to evade. No. Yeah. Yeah, that's all for me today. I'm just ready to hop off here. I want to say, guys, we are in solidarity with the unions at this point. I'm saying we're going to be right on their doorstep at Queen's Park on Friday. And we're going to be on their doorstep with them. All right. See you guys later. Bye-bye, guys.